so I'm just going over with a little bit of water. I'm using Schminky paints today, as well as pretty much any day. I always love my Schminky paints, love to use them. And I'm going to use, I'll tell you the paints as I use them, but for now we're going to drop in some raw sienna. And I'm going to mix that just with a little bit of water over here on my palette. And then I want to just dab it in. I don't necessarily want to do a full wash, because you can see there are multiple tones in this spread. So I just want to make it kind of spotty and allow the paint to bleed out and spread and cover. But remember, the paint will not go anywhere where it is dry. It will only move where either way you put it, but it will only move where there was water. So if you are careful with where you put your water, you can really control where your paint is going to spread to. So if we were going to do basics, watercolor absolute basics, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this all the way around while I'm talking. I'm going to put more water and then I'm going to drop more paint. If we were going to do watercolor basics, I should probably start by saying that watercolor is, of course, paint that uses water. So you want to mix it with water. You can use it straight out of the tube, but you're going to go through it a lot quicker. It's going to be heavier. It's going to look more like gouache, which is an opaque paint. It's not transparent. You can't see through it. And it's also, or maybe even like an acrylic paint, which is also an opaque paint which you can't see through. The thing about watercolor, which is so awesome, is that it is transparent, and that means that the light comes and the light goes through the paint, hits the back of the paper, and comes back out. So it actually looks often like watercolor is glowing if it's done in a way where it's not overworked. And by overworked, I mean too many layers. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of well-worked and well-detailed work is very beautiful, but it can also be really beautiful if you just lightly, loosely paint it, which would probably be the best way to learn how to do watercolor, I think, or initially to train, might be to practice doing really loose stuff. So here I have a bubble. This is a tiny little water bubble. And again, going with the basics of watercolor, I can either leave that water bottle and just completely leave it, walk away, and come back in 10 minutes and when it's been dried, or I can lift it off. So I want to keep working. I'll let it sit there for a few seconds, but I want to keep working and I don't want to worry about that bubble of water having to sink into the paper because it's not really doing anything, it's just sitting there. I don't want to worry about it moving and ending up somewhere else, possibly staining another part of the paper. So what I can do is I can take my brush and dry it off, which means just take your paper towel or your cloth and just wipe your brush off. Now water will run where there is no water. So the spot with the water always wants to go where it is the driest. So now my brush is dry for the most part, so I just tap it in and the water will get sucked up onto my brush. And then I can wipe it off and come back. And you can do this just with the tip of the brush and not even having to really move it, just touch it in there and it instantly soaks it right up. So it's like a paper towel on, on a spot of water on your counter. Just soaks it right up. And this is a really, really useful technique while painting, to know that water always wants to go where it is driest, because now if I had a loaded brush, my brush was loaded with water and paint, and my paper is dry, I put my brush to my paper, my water is going to flow off onto the paper. If the paper is wet and the brush is dry, the water is going to suck up onto the brush. That is, I wouldn't say the fundamental rule of watercolor, but it's a pretty good one. Okay, so we've got the ones around. Now this is a pretty light tone. I'm finding the lightest color here in my toast, all my toast, and I'm going ahead and painting that out first. Now the next ones, there are darker tones, and I think these tones are more like maybe a burnt umber, maybe some natural tint. Now you can use any color you want. If you have really simple watercolors where there are no color names on them, or they're in little pans, or something, you know, I mean, maybe you're using your kids' watercolor, maybe you're using really professional stuff. I will tell you what the colors are that I'm going to be using, but it's really not important. Just do whatever you want. Recently got a few questions where people have been asking me to include more information about exactly which paint colors I'm using. So I will try to do that more. I have a little bit on the edges, we're going to lift that off. Perfect. Okay, so I've got a few green specks too. That's from the remoulade, which is like a sandwich spread, like a mayonnaise sandwich spread. And it's little bits of basil and stuff that's on there. So I'm going to lay that in. I'm going to use a green yellow. That's Schminky number 536. If you guys have Schminky and you want to follow along exactly, I'll also mention the numbers. And I'm just going to dab them in here. And they're probably not even going to be my final detail at all. It's just a little bit of a foundation of the undercoat. So I want to dab in this color. And remembering that watercolor is a layering paint, so by putting in this color now, I'm going to put more color on top, this color will get darker, and then as I put more color on top, this color will get darker, because every time I layer colors on, the bottom color is darker and darker and darker. Which is also a really fun thing to work with in watercolor, because it means that you can texture. You can make things, they're all transparent, but you can make things different darknesses simply by adding the same paint on top of each other. You don't have to worry about always getting different tones. Also, in watercolor, you want to avoid using black, and you want to avoid using white. Now, when it comes to most mediums, you typically want to avoid using straight black, because you can always make your own black. There's never really a reason to use black right out of the tube. But often in other mediums, well, not often, almost always, you use white. In oil, you use white definitely as your foundation color, and then you layer things on top. In acrylic, you use white to mix, to lighten, you know, all the time. But in watercolor, we don't use white. Instead, we use water. So by taking one tone or one type of paint and adding water to it, you're able to lighten that tint, you're able to lighten that color, and then by adding more of that same color, or by adding less water, you're able to darken it. And if you really want to go crazy dark, you can always add another color that is darker. So I've gone around my tomato here, and I'm just doing some of these details. I've gone ahead and done them first, because like I said, I want to layer them in. So they're going to be darker when I put my wash on. And I also want to spend a little bit of time thinking about where my whites are going to be. So I know this inner section is going to be a little lighter. Probably going to have a little bit of white, maybe around the edge here. Maybe a white shine on the side of my tomato. A bunch of white shines maybe in here. So I have to think about where my whites are going to be, because how we do our whites is by keeping the white of the paper. So we're not going to paint our whites, we're just going to leave them exactly the way they are. Okay, so that has all dried on. Now I want to do a darker tone, and I think I'm going to use some burnt umber for my darker tone. So if I was to use it straight is even difficult because it's really dry. But let's say if I was to use it straight, it'd be something like this. Like, it's pretty dark. However, by pulling it out and adding water to it, way out here, I can get something, I can probably get something even lighter, but I can get something like this, like really nice and light. Almost looks a little, like adobe mud. It's very pretty. So burnt umber is one of my favorite colors because it's a color that you can just use in almost anything. It's so universally awesome. Works in everything. So having a piece of paper is going to be really good. Make sure that it's the same kind of paper that you're using. So if you can get one of your pieces and cut it up into scraps, you've got something like this, perhaps just something small, little scrap pieces. I have this one, I've already used it a few times with other things, but something teeny and tiny would work too. And that way I can check my color here and make sure if it's perfect before I come down here and actually put it onto my piece, which I may not want to have that color on this piece. Always start light. There's no reason to go in really dark. You can always add in more. So I just went over it once with this burnt umber, and then I used a slightly thicker version of the same thing, and now I'm doing the corner and I'm just tapping it in and bringing it up into the edges, but just with a light tap, and I'm allowing it to spread out because it's spreading out into paper that's slightly wet. That's perfect. And I'm making sure not to do it as a flat wash because I want to preserve these different textures. I'm going to preserve some of the white here. Maybe there's a salt grain or a little bit of that mayonnaise still there. We don't know. So let's bring a little bit here into the center. So I'm going to come in here with just the water and dab it around. And if I look at it from an angle, I can see the glare. Because it's clear water, I'm not going to know where I'm necessarily putting it. So it's really good to look at it from an angle. Also, if you look at it from an angle, you can put it on and then see how quickly it dries in. Because you're probably going to have to put it on more than once. Because the paper itself is so dry, especially where I am because I have a heater directly under my table. It's so dry that it just absorbs so quickly. So if I put this water on and then I go over here and get my paint, I'll come back and it'll all be dry. But by the same token, I don't want big, huge bubbles of water. That won't work either. I just want to put it down. Get it to like a shimmer, a halfway shimmer. If I think there's a little too much, maybe here that bubble's too much, go back with a slightly dry brush and just lift it out. Okay, and once it's on that half shimmer, then come in with your color and drop it in. And see how it spreads a little more? This is wetter than what was over here. And then on this side, it's getting much drier. So this is more like where the toast leaves little air pockets, because obviously the bread has air pockets, and only bits and pieces of it are going to be brown. Lots of little spots that aren't so brown. But over here, because of the way the water went, it's going to be pretty uniformed. Now it really depends on you what kind of toast you like. Do you like your toast golden or barely toasted at all, or do you like it really dark? I like it mostly golden with a little bit of brown, but really not so dark. Certainly not dark enough you have to scrape it. Yeah, no way. Now I should pretty much continue to do the entire toast, let's say in 2, maybe 3 colors. So we have our green yellow, our raw sienna, and our burnt umber. Those are the 3 colors we're using. And then I'm layering them as I go in order to get different consistencies or different tones, which is the darkness of the color, the intensity. This is raw sienna. So we're going to put this side in the shadow. Instead of using so much burnt umber, I'm going to use raw sienna and mix it with the burnt umber a little bit, a little more water, and just lighten that out from way back here. Okay, so next we have the edge of the bread, and that's looking really good. I think actually my toast is looking better than the real toast over here, and I'm going to eat one just to show you guys that these are in fact real pieces of toast, which I made about 10 minutes before I started filming this. So the center, the tomato. No, we were going to do the outside, right? Yes, let's do the outside. Well, the outside, great if we had one of these that didn't have a tomato on it. Oh, you know what? Let's use this one. Perfect. So here, there are different shades of color here. Not so many holes on this one because this is really the crust part on the top, but the bottom has a lot of holes. So that is a piece on the center of the tomato, on the center of the bread, sorry, here. whereas this is the crust. So this crust, I want to make it a little more like this, nice and smooth and soft, whereas this part, let's see, we want to make it look a little more like this. Lots more texture in here. So from this point, I'm going to fast forward and we'll see how we go. So I'm going to start by doing the shadows, the textures here in the bread. I'm going to do that first because I want to make sure that that is going to be on the bottom. So as I layer up, that's going to have a nice defined dark shadow under it. Now, remembering your lights, don't take them out completely if you're going to have any white at all. Leave it in there just a bit. And now I'm going to add some lemon yellow, just a tiny bit to make this, to warm it up a little bit. And now I'm putting in some raw sienna, and this time I'm just going to do it as tiny little specks because this is the center of the bread and there's a lot of air pockets in there, so it's going to be really textured. Then I want to leave all those white gaps, and then again using raw sienna, I'm going to start doing some of my shadows here on the edge. And this is the third time now I'm letting in the burnt umber again on top of the raw sienna, on top of the yellow lemon. And this time it's just more layering, but every time I'm layering not completely on top of the whole thing so you can see all three colors here. I'm also trying to keep this part pretty flat because it's the outside of the crust, and I think that actually looks kind of soft and flat. And now it's coming with a little bit of these shadows, and this time with slightly stronger burnt umber. And the paper is still quite wet, so it is bleeding. Well, not quite wet, it's slightly wet. So it is bleeding a little bit, but that's okay. Now, since I know that there's a dark edge here on the bottom, I want to make sure that I put that in here using the burnt umber. Just a really fine line, and it doesn't have to be complete. So I can have gaps like that. And then here I've got a change in light. So this side is going to be lighter than this side, so I really want almost a completely straight line down the center and this part to be darker. And that's going to help create a triangle there, the corner between the two. Here, where this tiny line is here, I want to add a little more above that. Right now it looked, or just a second ago, it looked a little too, that line was, looked too lonely. Okay, so now let's go ahead and tackle the tomato. I would also put a darker line here maybe a slightly darker line just on the edge out there, but we'll do that later. So for the tomato, this part is all going to be dry now. We're going to start with the darkest areas. So we're going to start with the darker areas, which would be here and here, where the tomato has fallen in. It doesn't always do that. Sometimes it's completely sealed all the way around. Other times maybe it falls away from the edge. So let's put some darker spots in these corners in order to layer them up. So I want to clean my brush. You know what? I'm really not using anything else. Well, let's use the water brush just for the fun of it. Let's come in here and just add a little bit of water. Okay, so for my tomato, I'm going to use Scarlet Red. And some Madder Lake Deep, I think. Probably some Cadmium Red Light as well to add a little bit of that orange, because the tomato does have a lot of orange in it. And let's see how those three colors go. Here's my test paper. It's pretty good for the highlights, actually. Now another option is if we went with the same color before, just go with a burnt umber. Bring that over here. Okay, and let's see what happens when we add some Scarlet Red into that. It's going to give us that darker, deeper red. Which looks very close. Now if we add some rose madder to that, ooh, that's a good one. Now all of these could work as tomatoes. Tomatoes are funny little plants that grow in many different colors. Okay, let's start by putting in our water. It's important to always mix your color before you bother putting your water on the paper. If you put your water on the paper but your paint's not mixed, by the time you come back with your paint ready, you won't have any water on the paper to put it into. So I'm tapping it in, and I'm wiggling it up and down as I go, so that it bleeds in the direction I want it to bleed. And then I'm going to come back with the water brush and just soften that outer edge here. When I'm using my water brush, I'm pulling it into the center. So let's go closer. So again, let's put in that water. And I'm just doing it around the edge. I'm not going crazy, I'm not covering the whole thing. This part here where the seeds are. Picking up my color, tapping it on the edge. And I'm dropping in a lot of color. It's pretty dark when I put it in. And I'm doing that, of course, because I know that it's going to dry lighter. So there's no point in going too late. I want to avoid the seeds, because they're already yellow. They're a yellow-green, or technically green-yellow, number 536. Let's add some water over here and do this side now between the seats. Don't forget I want to leave all those little white spots. Now of course if I had used mask it would be easier to leave them. And sometimes it's fun to try to do it without mask. Actually, most of the time I think it's fun to do it without mask. Now I want to leave a whole bunch of whites here because obviously there's going to be my highlights, but I won't leave as much as I have now. And I'm using the brush really like I'm dancing across, so I'm not holding on strong or tightly at all. It's quite the opposite. It's a very loose, almost indecisive stroke. But I like the way that the mark that gives, it's a little bouncy. And this is Madder Lake Deep number 358, and it's a schminky paint. And it's straight. Up here I mixed it, but this is just such a brilliant red, and there's really no point in mixing with anything else because I want really strong red. Now, what we want next is to add a tiny bit of water. Here maybe. Maybe around here, just to get it to blend in. And this is Cadmium Red Light number 349. It's a schminky color that I'm using. Okay, so I could easily be done there because that looks pretty good. I could clean up some of these tiny little bits and pieces here at the bottom. Maybe straighten that tomato out here a bit on the edge, but I like it the way it is. I could darken some of this orange just by dropping it in and letting it bleed around. But I think what I want to do is drop in some red on top of that and let them mix together here on the tomato. That's it. That's all. I'm all done. We're at the end. Actually, I'm editing it right now. I'm almost done editing it. I just realized that as I was filming this, I didn't actually do an ending where I talked to the camera. So I thought I would take a moment to talk to you right now and just add this in. Here is the final piece. My little tomato on toast. I put this on Instagram. It did really well. I got a lot of really good responses from Instagram. And there goes my monitor. Turn back on. I need the light. Thank you. Okay. So if you want to follow along, I'm also on Facebook under Learn to Paint with Scarlett. My private Facebook page is Scarlett Damen. You're free to follow me. I don't actually befriend anybody on Facebook that way because it's strictly family and people I actually grew up with. But you're free to follow me. All my posts are public. I have nothing to hide. But the Facebook page, Learn to Paint with Scarlett, is somewhere where I will interact. Definitely if you have comments or questions or you want to post your own work, post examples of what I'm doing if you want to try and copy it. I would love to see that kind of stuff. I'm also on Instagram and Scarlett Damen, and I do post on Instagram regularly, definitely during the winter. At least every painting I do, pretty much. I mean, unless it really sucks, which is kind of rare, but you know, there are occasionally times when I just say, forget it, I'm not putting that anywhere. Okay, so most of the time, pretty much every day, there's an image that's going up on Instagram, definitely in the winter, and then in the summer, I spend most of my time gardening. I have another channel, which is How to Grow a Garden with Scarlett, and that channel is as it sounds. It's all about my passion for food and gardening and plants and growing and getting back to the soil, getting back to where we came from, getting back to our roots, learning how to feed ourselves again, and taking that power back into our own hands so we can grow the tomatoes that we later want to eat and paint. I also have a channel called Healthy Living with Scarlett. It's a very new channel. Now, that depends when you watch this. By the time maybe you watch this in a few years and it's not you new at all. But I'm also posting there things about weight loss and health and healthy living and healthy diets and healthy foods, so different recipes and things like that. Things that I love to make and eat and whatever. Things that I grow and then take into the house and actually cook. So those are the channels and places you can follow along with me. Also, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy my my channel in general, and you're an artist, you want to paint, you want to learn, you can also join Patreon. I am on Patreon, and you can sponsor the channel there. You can sponsor me and the channel. Let's say a tip. If you want to give me a tip, I humbly accept tips through Patreon, any which way. It's totally cool. It's totally awesome. I'm thrilled. And, you know, even forget all of that. I'm thrilled that you guys watch and you comment here on YouTube and that you are interested and that you're subscribing and you guys give me a thumbs up. It's all really, really great. I really appreciate it. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next class. Don't forget, if you like to garden, gardening season is officially open. I put up my new video a few days ago on my How to Grow a Garden channel, so come on over there and check that out because it's really fun and I will be growing and painting what I grow. So I'm going to kind of combine the two channels as the year rolls on. I'm Scarlett. Thanks for watching. Toodaloo.